And greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through Everybody Loves Raymond Season 6. We are now on Episode 3, Odd Man Out. Another interesting episode that I saw in syndication, and it's one that has a mild retcon when it comes to the character of Marco, which I'll get into that once we get into the episode proper. Just a reminder here at the beginning, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you want to continuously support the channel, subscribe to the Patreon. You gain access to videos early, and you'll also be able to suggest topics for future videos. If you just want to do a one-off support or a one-off request, go the PayPal route. Either way, it is appreciated. Now, before I get into talking about this episode, this is something I probably should have done a couple episodes ago, and that is talk about some of the Season 6 stuff. Now, it was on January 22nd, 2001, when CBS signed with HBO and Worldwide Pants to renew this show for 2 more seasons. And Phil Rosenthal explained that the reason for that is that he and star Ray Romano planned for the 7th season to be the show's last, as, and I quote, "I never saw a show getting any better after 7 years." Kind of interesting that eventually they would continue 2 years after that. I guess they figured they have a little bit more story to tell. But if they had stuck to their guns, at least this show would have had a happy series finale as well, because what happens at the end of Season 7? Robert and Amy's long-awaited and belated wedding. Even though they do have some fun episodes after that, that would have been an interesting series finale where, you know, Robert's finally happy, everything comes full circle, and then it leaves you on, like, what's going to happen next. But we still do get some fun episodes after that, but I think as a whole, I could definitely say that Phil's comment is right, but we'll talk about that when we get to the next seasons after this one. Now, here are the Primetime Emmy Award nominations that this show got for this season. It was nominated for Outstanding Comedy Series. Ray won Outstanding Lead Actor for the episode The Breakup Tape. We'll talk about his performance when we get there. Brad Garrett won for Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. Now, I wasn't able to find it on Wikipedia what episodes he got nominated for, but I have an idea. And by the time I get to them, I'll look and see if he did or not. It did list what Doris Roberts won for, because she also won Supporting Actress, and that was for Lucky Suit and Marie Sculpture, which is going to be in 2 episodes' time. So we'll talk about her performance there when we get it. Peter Boyle was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and he didn't win. Oh, then again, he went up against Brad, so you could see why. At least he won to a coworker. And as I mentioned before, if there's any injustice about this show's run, is that Peter never won for acting on this show. I mean, he won an Emmy before, but he never won for playing Frank. It's an in crime, at least when it comes to the Emmys. Patricia Heaton was nominated for Best Lead Actress and for A Vote for Deborah. That's going to be a fun one. Your vote was a vote for slavery! Let's see, it was nominated for Outstanding Writing in a Comedy Series for 2 people. Phil was nominated for The Angry Family, and then Jennifer Crittenden, I always butcher her last name, Crittenden, was nominated for Marie Sculpture, so we'll talk about that in a couple episodes' time. This, of course, is Odd Man Out. Now, I mentioned at the top a mild retcon, and that is that Frank and Marie are now apparently friends with Marco. Now, I could see this happening once Marco and Stefania immigrated and moved to America, which, to kind of simplify it for the sake of the show, but I know there'd be a lot more of a process, them having to apply for all the papers and all that. But given they kind of give a mild hint about Marco, that he has kind of a shady past, he probably has some mob ties, I could see him getting it and then not feeling the need to go and actually spill what it is, other than Marco having some past that he doesn't need to talk about, but hinting about it. Like with Nemo's vanishing, he go away. They mentioned that in this episode, if I remember right. Now, the way they make it sound is that Frank, Marie, and Marco were friends back in Italy. Like, Marco and him played bocce. Now, if I remember correctly, Marco and Frank did not have a direct scene like that, but it could have happened off-screen. I mean, they were in Italy for a little bit. So it could be they played bocce. Could also be that Marco did it because he wanted to see what type of family the guy who had interest in his daughter was from, and then he actually became friends with Frank. But it's one of those things that it's left to your imagination, but since there was no talk about it before when Marco appeared, it goes there. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. You could say they might have been acquaintances in Italy, and then when he moved, they became actual friends. Now, it starts a typical day at Frank and Marie's house. They're getting a little bit of a bickering. Frank's sitting on the couch with his fly undone watching the game. Marco comes over, and he sees the fly, and he's like, is this a bad time? Nice little implication there. He's like, no. They're going to have a beer. They're talking about bocce. And then Marco asks if Marie is there. Now, Frank thinks that he's like, oh, no, she's not going to bother us with a beer. Then when Marie comes out and sees that Marco's there, Marco asks her if she could teach him piano, because he's heard that she's a great piano teacher, a fact that's been long established in the show. In fact, we even had an episode back in Season 2 dealing with it, when she was trying to teach Allie how to play the piano, and then Ray decided to learn again. And the reason Marco brings it up is that he's always wanted to learn piano for his mother, but he thinks he's now too old and his mother passed away, and he wants to try to do it to appease her. And Marie's like, oh, you're such a good boy. Your mother would be so proud of you, of course. And, of course, Frank's a little annoyed, like, we're going to have a beer here. And then, I love the line Marie shoots back at him. This is a man that wants culture in his life, that thirsts for more than just alcohol. And, of course, for the end of this scene, and then in between that and the next, Frank is all pouty, as he feels his friend is being taken away from him. And he goes across the street and talks with his sons about it, eventually, and he's a little snooty with it, to the point where Ray even tries to push him out, like, hey, if you're going to be like this, go back to your house. Can't, they're over there. And he tells them that they're having, they're over there carrying on and playing bocce, making biscotti, playing the piano. They're friends. And I love that Deborah's like, oh, are you a little jealous? And of course, Frank does admit he is a little jealous, but it's because Marco was his friend first. And of course, the way he words this, they do roast him a little bit. Oh, don't worry, I'm sure there's a guy out there for you somewhere. And Frank's like, what? Now, Deborah is on Marie's side in this because she feels that Marie should have any type of friend she wants. Now, it comes up in a later scene more directly, but Ray doesn't think that Marie should be friends with Marco because she feels that she should not have a guy best friend. And this is one aspect of the show that definitely has not aged the best. Now, you could say that in the early 2000s, this probably should not have been brought up like this, but it is an example of Frank's mindset leaching a little bit out into Ray, and then them confronting it. And also of the time, because back then they did do a little bit more stuff like this in sitcoms. Not as much as they did in the years prior, but they still had some of this here. Nowadays, they just wouldn't fly. Make of that what you will and say, oh, it's an example of, decadence and the quote-unquote woke culture and all that. But it's also, you could say that, but I wouldn't say it goes that far. It's just one of those things like, yeah, this isn't probably not the way to go. And the main reason for that is, who cares if she's a married woman, as Ray puts it? She's allowed to be friends with whoever the hell she wants. And most of her friends are guys. She's allowed to have guy friends. Just in turn, if most of Frank's friends were females, they're allowed to have friends. As before this, the only friends we've seen Frank and Marie have would be mutual friends, which means that technically Marie's comment later on about people that like her can't stand Frank is not 100% correct. But she's probably talking about solo people, not like married couples that come as a friend package, like Lee and Stan, Albert, Lucy, the Stipes, where it's a package deal that they could get along with and balance each other out in their friendship, but like a solo act like Marco. But from the looks of it, he's friends with both of them, and he even points it out later on in a later scene. But Marie and them are allowed to be friends with whoever they want. So this whole thing of, oh no, she can't have a guy best friend, or you, and all that. I love that Deborah actually calls Ray out on it, and then he tries to backpedal a little bit. You can be friends with as many guys as you want as long as they're all gay. No. You can be friends with anybody because a friend is a friend. The only thing is you got to draw a boundary if said friend tries to make that relationship more than just friendship. And especially if you're already in a relationship or married. But that's another situation entirely. That's one where if you want to push him away. Now, I know someone's going to say, would you have a problem with your significant other if you were in one? Now, I've never had an issue with people I've dated having friends of the opposite gender or same gender. Well, same gender is usually not really a big issue, but of the opposite gender, I've never had an issue. My ex Jennifer, a lot of her best friends were males. I've never had an issue with it. The last couple people I did, well, mainly the last person, never had an issue to most of her friends. Close friends were males. No big issue there. I know there might be, some people might say there's that little thing there, but never had an issue with it. Because there's always was that little line there, and you don't cross over that line. Some people might be weird, but it's the thing of communication and being an adult. Now getting a little bit back on topic, Frank, being Frank, decides to escalate the situation and confront Marie about it. And he's going to confront Marco about it too, but then Marco's like, yeah, I'm not going well piano, and decides he's done with it. And that he's just going to hang out with Frank. So it basically switches, and now Marco's hanging out with Frank all the time. Now, before Marco and Frank leave to go to the lodge, Marie does try to appeal to Marco, like, but you promised your mother, but she's dead. And of course, you know, them being practicing Catholics, Marie has to get in the, but she can still see you, dig. There's that Catholic guilt there. And even if it's true, even if somebody could survive in death and watch it, it's like, I think that Marco's mother would be too busy sitting around paradise to give flying you-know-what one way or another that he decided to practice the piano. Unless he was doing it at a memorial service to her. Now, Frank and Marco go, they're having fun, you know, playing bocce, swimming nude at the lodge. And like what Frank did, Marie decides to go back across the street and complain about it to Ray and Deborah. And while she's complaining about it, Frank comes across the street and they get into an argument about it. And it brings up Marie's birthday. And Marie uninvites Frank from it. And Marco's already going to be busy that day because he's playing Happy Birthday on the piano. Well, the day of the birthday comes, everything seems to be going all right. Ray's sulking because he doesn't want to be out there watching his mother and her boyfriend, as he calls him. Which goes to do his whole thing. It's like, really, Ray? You can be platonic best friends with someone of the ultimate gender. This is where, as in the words of George Lopez, somebody needs to give Ray a putazo like no other up the side of the head. Bounce off the wall, they're going to hit him so hard. And we've seen his mother give him a putazo a couple times, so he needs another one. I don't know how you would say putazo in Italian, but it'd be like, oh, about. Take that, he needs a bunch of them. Party seems to be going good. We get to see another Gerard appearance here. It's a minor one. It makes sense since he's Marie's side of the family and it's Marie's birthday that he'd be there. We see his lack of situational awareness in there when they meet Marco. I mean, Marie's cousin, Gerard's mother, is the less offensive comment because she's looking at him and he's like, he's so authentic. Of course he is. He's directly from Italy. But then Gerard is like, I've never met one from Italy before. Hello, acting like he can't speak English. It's like, dude, if he's being introduced in English, obviously he can speak English. That's one of those ones that Marco glaring at him and then Gerard deciding to back off. You understand, because that's one of those situations I was like, really, dude? Why are you asking that? Or saying it like that? Now, the funny thing about that is that in the blooper reel, when Marco is being introduced by Marie, one time she flubbed the line and it almost sounded like she dropped an F-bomb, and she's even like trying to regain her composure before they did a retake. I wonder if that was a take before the take of the episode or after, but considering Marco's name, it is a hard last name to pronounce. Now, since it's at Ray's and Marco's going to be playing Happy Birthday, a piano has to be brought in. So, who brings it from across the street? None other than Robert. And despite him being a big guy, he does hurt his back. Now, in regards to his back, Robert does get a fun one-liner in, and Brad Garrett sells this line beautifully, where Marie, being her usual self, is just like, is it your back? No, I'm from Japan. I bring greetings from the Emperor. It's still a very fun line. Well, Frank decides to make an appearance, and he mentions some little things he heard about him in passing, which I'm not going to spoil here, because I don't want to spoil everything about the episode. him and Marie get into another debate, and Marco gets dragged in, and this is where he's like, this is not a husband and wife. When my wife was alive, we were friends. Which is true. When you're in a relationship like this, you're not just lovers. You're supposed to be close friends. Maybe not entirely best friends, but you should be a best friend to each other. And of course, that's one thing we never really get to see a lot from Frank and Marie. Which, of course, when we did a couple seasons ago hear Marie give that type of advice, Ray even looked at her like, you said you and Dad were best friends. You guys should be a form of best friend to each other. Whether or not you are 100% best friends is going to depend on your friend group, but you should be a best friend to each other. Or at least close friends. I mean, obviously you're sleeping with one another, so that's going to be closer than you're going to be with other friends, but, you know, close as in intimately in knowledge of one another, being able to tell each other secrets and all that. And Marco understands that. These two don't. Now, it does kind of end on a sweet moment from Frank that spirals into another argument. I'm not going to spoil it because I actually want you to watch this part. But with how it ends, you can understand why Marco does not make a direct appearance after this in the show. So sadly, this is going to be the last episode with David Proval making a cameo appearance. And by extension, it's also the last appearance of Stefania, because she cameos in the epilogue scene, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, Marco's Pizza does appear in episodes after this, but sadly we don't get him. I don't know if it's they just didn't have anything for him, he was busy with other projects, or they offered him like a cameo role and he's like, no, I don't want to come in for it. Now, the last part of the episode with the epilogue is Ray and Deborah talking about the outcome of this thing, and then Deborah standing up like, I'm not going to put any up with any more of your caveman crap with this. A friend is a friend. And then who should show up but Stefania, and Ray invites her and like, come in, friend. And you can automatically tell that Deborah's getting a little jealous. Now, you could say it's a little bit of her hypocrisy coming in, but I say it's more because Ray is throwing her stuff back at her and being a little bit more of a... I don't know if his man-childness would entirely go into this, but he's being a little bit of a prick with it, like throwing it back at her, like, come in, friend, which, it's true, he can be friends with Stefania if you want, but we all know the main reason he's doing that is to try to make Deborah jealous. So with him, it's like, really, Ray? So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a putazo for that, too, afterwards. All in all men out is another fun episode of the show. Steve Scroven and Jeremy Stevens were the teleplay writers, and they do a good job capturing the essence of all the characters, but given how long they've worked for the show and how much longer they will work for the show, you definitely can tell they got the characters down pat by this far into the show. I mean, it's season 6 of 7 planned at this point in the show, so this late in they should have a good idea of the characters, just like the actors should have a good idea of how to play their characters in certain situations, so it's a good little dynamic. Definitely is one from this season I do recommend. It is one that I had fun watching in syndication. I don't remember what all was cut out from it from syndication, but not a whole lot. I think like just little bits here and there. It's definitely one that if you're showing season 6, definitely is on the watch list. It's definitely going to be on the VHS list I plan on making next. As is the next episode, which is another one I watched in syndication. And it's going to be a fun one to talk about because it's going to be technically a Ray-centered one, but it also is going to touch on the whole relationship between Ray and Deborah. And also a good question involving wedding rings. Is it kosher to remove one, and when? Till next time, guys.